Wow, great video. I hadn't seen that one before. Well, welcome back, and we wanted to make an announcement about the 2024 Farm Robotics Challenge. We have the teams from the 2023 Farm Robotics Challenge, and that was 19 teams across a number of universities. I can't remember the exact number, 12 universities across the United States. That was our very first year doing this. We worked with the FarmNG robotics platform, which you see plastered all over here at the event. And we're ready to do the next round. And so we are calling on all of you from industry, from academic institutions, from wherever you sit to participate in some way, whether you want to host a team, whether you want to support a team, whether you want to be a sponsor. This year we have, in addition to four-year colleges and universities, we had Hartnell College, or community college here in Salinas, participate last year. We're looking to expand community college participation. Eventually, we'll be actually expanding into high schools as well. So we feel like it's a really amazing program to get young people engaged in agriculture by working on a solution, and one that is fairly close to the market. So we're pretty excited about it, and we'd love to talk to you more about it. There's a website, you can check it out, and we're going to hit go right after the event and recruit more teams all over the country, and this year we might even have teams internationally as well. So we're thrilled for you to participate in that and hear about that. But farmbot.ai if you want to check out more. We're going to do another round of lightning talks before we get into our afternoon panel. And our first speaker up for our after lunch talk, Professor Luca Brillante from Fresno State. Welcome.
All right. Thank you for introducing me. Thanks for staying in the room this afternoon. I just don't know how to advance my slide. Is this from the microphone?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, so I will talk about a project we've been running for a couple of years at this point, which is about the use of hyperspectral sensing for assessing water status in Vineyard, and in particular in a variable rate irrigated vineyard block. There is no clicker. The what? Oh, here. This one? All right, here we go. Perfect. So yeah, we'll brief outline. We'll talk about a little bit the situation of water in agriculture. I'll give you an introduction about the methods, and then the results of the first year, which was 2022, and a little bit of perspective of what we are acquiring right now in the field, or actually at least my team, because I didn't really go to the vineyard at all this year. So of course, even though we had a very rainy season, California is subject to repetitive droughts, and this has a large impact on the sustainability of agriculture, not only from an environmental point of view, but also from an economic point of view. In particular, woody perennials are particularly sensitive because cannot be planted only in the good years. They need to stay there even when the conditions are too dry to farm. So in assessing water for irrigation, I'm sure you will be around and see many different opportunities and solutions provided by vendors and new technological startups. But in general, we can divide them into three big groups. One which is a soil-based method, which include soil sensors such as TDRs, FDRs, soil capacitance sensors, tensiometer, and so on. Then we have plant-based methods, which are the ones that traditionally growers use the most because integrate already the conditions of the plant with the condition of the soil and the atmosphere. And the most traditional one is the pressure chamber, or colloquially the pressure bomb. But also other solutions such as dendrometers or chemical methods and so on. And then we have model-based methods. These also find quite a bit of space into the ag technology world, and they can be divided into mechanistic models, which try to assess plant biology and physiology at a more fundamental base, which tend to be less tend to be easier to generalize but less accurate in predictions. And then you have empirical models, which includes the machine learning solutions, which normally have higher performance in prediction, but they generalize much less well to new conditions, at least for the amount of data that is required to calibrate them. So the solution of this project, like the questions that we posed was, can we actually use hyperspectral sensing as a way to assess from remote the water status of any plant, and in particular we apply to Grapevine. And we know that imagery is well used in this domain. We have thermal imagery in particular that has found space, and with multiple vendors also offering that. So what is hyperspectral imaging? Is you may be familiar with multispectral or the NDVI readings. So we normally acquire 4 different color bands, the red, green, blue, and near infrared, and we combine them to produce indices that can be informative. In the hyperspectral imagery, we don't only acquire 4, but we acquire hundreds of them. And that makes a much more detailed and informational image that can be used at any scope in some way. So if you look at the plot here on the x-axis, you have the wavelengths, and on the y-axis you have the reflectance, which is the amount of light that is reflected by any object. In particular, this is the reflectance spectrum of vegetation tissue. And normally our interaction with the world, with the physical world, is limited to the visible, which is into the 500, 700, 400, 700 nanometers. And of course you can see plants green because they reflect a large amount of light into the green region of the spectrum. After that, we go into the near infrared, which is relevant to the structure of the cells, also in some way informative about the overall health of the plant. That's why NDVI it's informative in that sense. And then we go into the shortwave infrared, which is the domain of this study. But of course, the electromagnetic radiation continues even further on the wavelength space. And what we see is, in particular, in the shortwave infrared, and there are 2 regions that absorb water in the strongest amount, which are around 1400 and 1900 nanometer. But as we go further in there, we also have more information about the interaction of chemical compounds with lights, and we can obtain information about that. In this study particularly, we work between the 900 and 1700 nanometer because we wanted to target that band at 1400 nanometer, which has a strong absorption for water. So the vineyard is located in Cantua Creek. It's on the west side of the valley. It's an area that is subject to continuous drought. And through radio-connected solenoids, we created a randomized experimental design, which is composed of a total of 48 experimental units in multiple different irrigation regimes. And so each of these there are a total of 12 rows. In each row there is 4 experimental units, and so each experimental unit is replicated 4 times. On the center image, you have just a map of the field, and you see how they are distributed in the vineyard. And again, each single experimental unit is irrigated in a different way, in an autonomous fashion. And on the table on the bottom, you have the irrigation regimes that we applied with a different amount of water, pre-veraison and after veraison, in order to honestly just create variability into the response of the grapevine to water status, and a very large data set that we could build a model on. For the material and methods, the variable rate irrigation is obtained with these tools, which is produced by a collaborating company, which is Verdi. And then we acquire data on the field through a pressure chamber, but also with an infrared gas analyzer for stomatal conductance and net assimilation. And then we run a shortwave infrared hyperspectral camera through a drone at the same time, or close to the time of data acquisition. The variability in water potential is, this first year results, is very large. We go from -12 bar to -20. We didn't really have a very strong separation between treatments because generally the vineyard was severely deficited because of a lack of water we had in 2022. Nevertheless, there is a very large variability with time and also in space. So these are the results of the hyperspectral imaging. It really looks like a satellite image, except that it acquires information in domains that we normally do not really have access to through satellite, not at this detail. And then we have started developing machine learning models that try to segment the grapes from the soil and the background with a very high resolution, and then try to correlate the hyperspectral imaging to the water status. And so on the left, you have the results on the cross-validation routine, which is the process into building the model, and on the right, you have the results on the test set. So the overall performance are around 1 bar of error. And again, this data set, it's first-year results, and we are continuously acquiring data for a couple of years, and we'll apply that not only to stem water potential, but also to stomatal conductance and net assimilation. And so in general, as a conclusion, I like to say that, yes, in the first year of this project, we really just put the experimental site up, 48 different experimental units irrigated in a different way. We were able to acquire a decent amount of data to at least give a shot and see if, as a proof of concept, things were coming along. And we need to continuously acquire more in order to try to build a more robust and reliable model on. But as a proof of concept, we know that there is a very strong biological background between the water absorption in that specific region of the spectrum and plant water tissue. Water in plant tissues, and so we are confident that we will be able to improve performances. This year we started early. The first year we started later in the season with the difference in irrigation. That was just because funding arrived at that time. So by the time we got started, it was already after fruit set. And then we will be working at the plant level and not averaging the data from all experimental units into one single data point. And we want to work also on leaf water content and stomatal conductance, which is assessment of direct amount of water in plant tissue and overall transpiration at the leaf level. So the idea then for the third year of the study is to use the information from the drone to actually irrigate these different units according to what is the water need, and so at a variable rate in an autonomous way. All right, I'll thank you all the people of the lab, in particular Dr. Laroche-Pinel, which is leading the data acquisition in the field, and all the people that contributed to the data acquisition. Kyla Vasquez, which was a graduate student that coordinated the work last year on this project and acquired the imagery data, and in general, all the students at Fresno State work on these kind of projects. Thank you. Any question? Yes. I can hear you. I'll repeat the question.
So one question I have, with the near infrared, not even infrared, but short wave, are you able to measure the density, not density, but are you able to measure the water within lignin? I think I saw a slide in it for lignin.
You can use that to measure lignin, right? Like it's responsive to COH bonds, and so that's why you can actually measure the lignin content. Now there must be some penetration in the tissue. We know it depends on the organ that you are considering. Now I don't know how much goes into the wood, but into grapes, for example, it goes a couple centimeters in, so like 1 inch. We'll need to test. That's not something. Why do you think it's? Are you interested into knowing how much water do you have in the wood itself?
I would look for it from. So we're professional field grafters, and I would look at it from the perspective to see how much water is actually going into the actual graft, the actual scion portion of the vine, and how much water is actually within the plant already in the bottom portion.
yeah, kind of making a video of the xylem water flow. I don't think we can really get there. It's not the right tool for that purpose. But you may have an idea of how green your wood tissue is, as opposed to how dormant or how dead that tissue is. Yeah. Any other question? All right. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, Lorenzo.
Hello. Hello. Let's see, forward, back. Okay. So I'm going to talk a bit about informative path planning for scalar dynamic reconstruction using coregionalized Gaussian process in the spatiotemporal kernel. It's a mouthful. So I saw that on the paper and I was like, oh no. So this is really what it is. It's surveying dynamic environments with autonomous robots. That's what we're doing. And why? Well, it's great that I spoke after Professor Luca because he has the context. You know, you have these sensors on drones and you want to get good information about your environment. What do you need to make those models? You need, well, look who's on the ground. There you have the drone operator, but you also have some people on the ground. Oh, you have some equipment on the ground. Oh dear, you have some equipment that you need to calibrate. And you have some GPS stuff. You need to get training data is what you need to get. And that training data is laborious, you know, it's tricky. Even the operator needs to get training data sometimes. So the point I'm trying to make is that training data is hard work. Why not automate it? Why not put those sensors on small mobile robots? Why not have them strategically sample in ways that you can guarantee that they are sampling where they need to be in order for you to generate the sort of accuracy you want in your models? And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about planning algorithms for these robots. And I'm going to, talk high level about this. If you want some more information, please come see me. So here's the goal. The goal is to produce a sequence of translations, so movements, a sequence of movements so that you move the robot from an origin to some goal destination while maximizing the information you gather in the environment along or subject to some budget constraint. So that budget constraint is, how much gas is in the tank, how much battery you have. You have to be strategic about where you sample. This is related to, there are a lot of studies that talk about this with regard to optimal sensor placement. So this is a topic that is as old as we've been getting surveys in the environment. And this is a sort of schematic overview of our system. You have some sensor that, let me look over here so I can see what it is. You have some sensor that gets data and translates that data into measurements, right? Like you have some voltage coming from the sensor and you want to turn that into a measurement. And then that goes into whatever constructs your map. From that map, you can derive some information, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that information is. And you can pass that information into a planning algorithm that tells the robot where it should go next. And then that is passed to the vehicle controller. The robot moves in the environment. Then movement moves the sensor to a new location, and then the whole system repeats. So for those of you who are familiar with geostatistics, there is this idea of spatial interpolation called kriging that's based on this statistical construct called a semi-variogram. And basically that tells you how much variance you can expect to see in your environment, like how different points are from each other. Like you'd expect points that are very close together to be very related. Like if I get some soil measurement here and I move 1 foot away, I expect it to be pretty related. But if I move like, a kilometer away, there's no guarantee that they're going to be very related. So you can think of the inverse of that. So instead of looking at the dissimilarity, you look at the similarity. And we can construct a function that relates all of that together. And this is what it looks like. This is a little bit of a hairy figure, but what I want you to get at is if you don't know anything, you're prior, the world is random. When you know some things, so if you look at those little dots in the center panel, those are observations that we make. And that gives us some information about the world that's around us. And so if you look in the third panel, it doesn't really show up that well because it's, the screen's a little washed out, but basically you get these like error bands, and the error gets higher the farther you move away from an observation that you've made. So this is just looking at it in one dimension, but we can think about it in 2D. So we're trying to model some parameter in the environment that could be like soil moisture, it could be some plant health, it could be something you need to measure to train the algorithm that's giving you information from the drone images. So on the left is the environment, the red dots are where you sample, the middle is the prediction that we make, and then on the right is a map of uncertainty. And if you had to get measurements from a robot, it would make sense to sample where you're the most uncertain, right? You want to maximize your certainty. You want to maximize the accuracy of the map. But this is just considering 2 dimensions, a world that doesn't change. But the world changes. There's a lot of change, you know, like the sun goes up, things dry out, you apply some treatment to your field, things change. So how do we consider that 3rd dimension, time? Before I get there, you can think of it like this, where the robot knows what's underneath it, and then it's getting probabilities of what that environment is in other places, and it's deciding to go to where those, you know, probabilities are largest. And this figure on the right, I'm showing little figures from my poster, so if you're interested, you can come by and ask me about them. This is just a visualization of what that structure of uncertainty looks like to the algorithm. I think it looks pretty cool. So we can think of the 3rd dimension. What about time? And the cool thing about that is that, okay, well, let's say you grab an observation now, you move somewhere else, time goes on, that observation might be stale, you know? It might make sense to actually have your robot go back and resample that location. So we can consider that as like a 3rd dimension, where time is visualized vertically. In the center, we have this uncertainty map. So you see the red parts of the map are where there's lower uncertainty. And if you get an observation in some point, then it's valid for some region in the future and some region in the past. And you can construct functions that bound that. There would be a video here, but the video isn't working. So this is an example of what that looks like. Our algorithm randomly produces candidate locations. We calculate the reward that the robot would get if it would move to that location, which would be based on the uncertainty you get from your modeling algorithm. And then the robot executes that, and we build some representation of the environment on the bottom in panel C. And panel D just would show you how it evolves over time. We're looking at little slices. And this is one of the figures I have in my poster. All I'm trying to show here is that the performance depends on this thing called an environmental prior. So basically, if you think that the world is very smooth and the world is very rough, and the robot grabs samples assuming the world is very smooth, it's going to underperform. And the cool thing is, if you have an adaptive algorithm, then you can update, you can tune your mapping algorithm as you grab things in the world, as you grab measurements, as you kind of revise your expectation of what you'd expect to see out there. So what are some ongoing developments? We are in the process of trialing this in a small farm right by UC Merced. We just have a paper that's in review that talks about applying this where you have multiple robots. Variable sensor models would be a thing to consider. Let's say you have one measurement from like a camera, one measurement from a point sensor, And then updating priors from experts or human surveys. So bringing that human knowledge from like the traditional survey, informing where your robot should go, that I think is a great area to extend this. So please check us out in the F3 booth. I'm with UC Merced. Check out F3 Innovate. Check out robotics.ucmerced.edu. And yeah, I can answer some questions. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Mason.
Hey everybody, how are you? Yeah, good. All right, I'm gonna do a survey. Who considers themselves on the technology side? Can you raise your hand? Engaging my audience here, okay. And there's a bright light over here, but I can kind of, okay, what about the agriculture side? You can't raise your hand both times, stop it. And what about, do we have anybody who, throw out another one. Where would the third group be in here? Education, home? Your home? Who thinks they came here for a rodeo, but they just happened to end up at a talk about robots? Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some work that we're doing at UC Davis and more broadly at the AI Institute for Food Systems. My name is Mason Earles. I'm one of the leads on the AI Institute for Food Systems, also assistant professor at UC Davis. And the project I'm going to talk about is related to getting more people focusing on the intersection of computer science, robotics, and agriculture. And so there's a question how we do that. Who knows how many computer science degrees were awarded last year in the US? You can guess, it's okay. I didn't know until I looked it up earlier. 5,000, is that what I heard? Okay, good guess. So 110,000. Okay. ChatGPT told me that, I hope it's right. So, okay, so we got 110,000 computer science degrees, but I think it's right. So, how many of those people do we think are focusing on ag and robotics? Most of them are here right now. I'm gonna, spoiler alert. So, I mean, we could probably get a rough estimate just by counting people. So, the next question is how we can increase that amount of people that are focusing on agriculture and robotics. And one of the ways I think that this has been successful in other fields, if we look to them, such as medicine, health, autonomy, autonomous driving, is through creating shared data, shared infrastructure around digital infrastructure, and building a community of code base we can all build from. Okay, so this is called AgML, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I'll jump through my slides. I have a lot of them and not a lot of time. So the ImageNet moment, for those of technologists, you're like, oh dear, he's talking about this. But I just want to tell you really quickly what this is. And so for those of you who aren't aware, back in about 2012, building up to this point, there was a ton of data that had been collected and annotated. And by annotated, I mean someone went in and labeled every one of these images, a hot dog, as a cat, as a plant, et cetera. And this actually formed the foundation, along with some hardware that came about, for being able to train sorry, I saw something change back here. Deep learning models. And so if you've heard of deep learning models, this was sort of the basis of what people consider as the foundation of all this acceleration of growth in deep learning. So there's a question of how we can do this for agriculture and what's unique about agriculture and how we can get that 100 and something thousand growing computer science majors to focus on agriculture. So to me, there's some interesting aspects of the problem for ag, right? We know that ag production is highly variable, and all I mean by that is there's all sorts of ways of managing, growing different types of crops. We've got different locations and environments, and then our sensors change in those environments. Another one is that we have these different sensor needs for different agricultural applications. And so a lot of you have seen a number of these different sensors out there, so the data sets are varied and really interesting from my perspective on a technical side. We also have different ground truth needs, so we could be doing something that ranges from, I've got up here, image classification, through figuring out what's a weed versus what's a plant, through trying to drive, as we've heard, a UAV or a tractor autonomously through a field. So at the end of the day, those who raised their hand when they said I'm on the farming side, this is probably what you care more about, which is how do we figure out water and nitrogen demand, irrigation needs, where we need to go spray, actually how to do that and do it in an automated, mechanized way, right? So this is sort of the end state of these AgML pipelines. Also, we have a number of different vehicles we can do this from. You've heard about a few here, ground-based, aerial, tractors, et cetera. And something interesting is saying, all right, well, we have this rapidly growing community on the agriculture machine learning side. If you go out and search a bunch of pubs, you can see that this is a few years old, but it's growing pretty tremendously in terms of the number of publications. So we've got data sets from that set of researchers who are out there, or industry, that are building and labeling data sets, right? And there's this potential for bringing that together as a first step through the process of centralizing data, so putting it all in one place where you can easily grab it, and standardizing that data in a way that when you grab it, you can do something with it without wasting 3 days trying to prepare it. So I'm going to try to get this to change. You can't see. Also in mine, this looks different in, well, the back slide over there. The point here is that there's a bunch of different unique modeling architectures to agriculture. And so for those of you who care, you know that. For those who don't, it's okay. I'm going to skip through a few of these slides here to say, finally, there's this interesting problem or an interesting opportunity that's happening in other fields. Domain-specific fields mean like agriculture, but we might be talking food production, food manufacturing, other manufacturing. Amazon has put a lot of money into this as well, which is synthetic data generation. So one of the challenges is we don't have enough data labeled. We can collect data all day long, but labeling is very laborious. We just heard about that too. So there's an opportunity for using synthetic data to jumpstart a lot of the models that we're building. Okay, so we need more than just a massive data set for agricultural AI, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about what we're doing, and I hope you all go check this out. So it's called AgML, and so AgML, you can go, those of you who know about GitHub, go check out the code. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do there. There's some notebooks you can play with. If you've never coded too much, you could probably get going and try out a few things here as well. And so within a few lines of code, we want you to be able to grab those data sets. And so here you can see, for example, oh boy, is there a back? Yeah. So we've got about 40 different data sets right now focusing on computer vision. These are from across the board, a lot of different studies, and people have put effort into building these data sets. So what we want is every time someone builds a data set, you can get as much legs out of that as possible, right? So we have one line of code, and by the time you download this Python library, within a line of code, you can grab any of these data sets and all their annotations from it. So we think that's pretty cool, because you can all of a sudden have data within a few lines of code from 40 different studies that have put it out there that was scattered across the internet before this. So the other thing we're thinking about, here's the 36 data sets. So once you have data, what can you do with it? So once you have data, we can train models, right? And training models means we go out and we try to teach a model to detect a weed versus a carrot or something, whatever that particular data set was on. So what we did was train 36 different models on every one of these data sets, and then we've released all those model weights so that you can go grab any of those pre-trained models for any of these data sets, and you can start training your own model from them. So the next thing we did is, well, once you have pre-trained weights and you train models, you have scores for how well your model did. And we're not saying we did the best. What we're trying to say is, here's a score using a relatively state-of-the-art model. Go beat it. So that's where we set benchmarks, right? And this has been something that's been really helpful in the medical field or across other fields, is to be able to say, hey, here's a score, here's the best score for this data set. Or, even more interestingly for us in ag that have a lot of types of data sets, here's the best score across 36 different data sets. Here's a model that scores the best across all of these. That allows us to say, maybe more confidently, that when we go into a new crop type or a new environment, that model you're built might perform well in a new place, right? So I think having a lot of data sets to test on is really powerful. We've got about, so far, there's different ways of measuring how successful your code base and how used this is. Right now we have about 96 stars on GitHub. All that means is somebody said, I like it. It's like getting a heart on Instagram. Maybe it doesn't matter, maybe it does, I don't know. But it seems to be gaining some traction. This was just 85 last week, so maybe we talked somewhere about it. You guys got excited, so go check it out. A lot of data sets, I'm almost done. One line of code, you can get data, get the models, and a few more lines of code. The other cool part, so there's at UC Davis, there's a professor there named Brian Bailey, and he's developed what I consider to be probably the most sophisticated 3D biophysical crop model in the world. So you can generate 3D crops of about 12 to 14 different crop types. And what's the coolest part about this is we've built the capacity to auto-label out of that synthetic data. So in a model, a simulated world, you know where everything's at. You know where all the fruit's at. You know where the leaves are at. You know where the plants are at. And you can place a fake camera anywhere in that synthetic environment. And with a few more lines of code in AgML, you can generate the images that would be taken from this camera and the labels from that. So you can see here, it's kind of small, but you can see on the left, there's like a grape vineyard. And you can see that the blue parts have been auto-labeled as the canopy, the red are the fruit, the yellow are the stems. And you can do that infinitely as long as you have the compute to do it. Right, so that's another cool interface we think we've built. Benchmarks. Metrics and validation framework, this is important, but I'm going to skip through because I'm out of time. I just wanted to say we've got a number of people here, but the most important part is that we want to interface with folks in industry. We think this is a tool that, how can we bring together industry, the public sector, and the university academic researchers? And the way to do it is really what we've seen in the past. When you get a bunch of coders together, is the more coders you've got excited, the more excited the other coders get. So if you guys can, I think building a community around this is the first step. So if you're here as a technologist, encourage your developers to go check it out. If you're here as someone on the agriculture side, I would encourage your technologist to go encourage somebody to go check it out. And I think what this can do is potentially accelerate the rate of development across the board for any of these technologies that use cameras, that use computer vision, or that more generally might use agricultural machine learning. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yep. We have a human program that puts them in the common format right now. So they were not in the same format, and HESUP's one person sitting up here. There's a number of people who we've kind of spread that work across. I've done a number of them. But that's a challenge. But the idea is that once we establish a standard, hopefully we won't have to do that anymore, right? But there's a lot of data that's been generated that's sort of the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, is getting all that just standardized. And in one place where when you know, one line of code, you can grab it. So yeah, it was a bit of work to do that. There's more to come. Yep, Luca? Yeah, it's mostly imagery right now, and I think there's a big opportunity for doing a lot more than that. It's just sort of where our bread and butter's at in the lab. But UAV and ground-based robots and handheld manual. And it says when you go, you can look back at, if you click on any of these data sets for the most part, let me see, here you can see this like metadata. It'll tell you the license, we only used open source data sets. It'll tell you who the source of the data, so who it came from and what study it came from. It's going to also tell you how many images, if we know what the data acquisition device was, that sort of thing. So I mean, I think this metadata oftentimes is actually equally important as the data itself. So I think building that out is also an interesting project in and of itself. Yeah. Yep. Yep, synthetic data means we made it in a computer. So we created a 3D crop in a computer. And the cool thing about Brian's crop model is it takes into account all the physics of how the plants work, so all the photosynthetic models, the evapotranspiration models are built within it. And then there's also the sensor itself, so that the camera is modeled. So what that means is we can go out and try to simulate various things that are really difficult to see or may cost a lot to measure and start building models. It doesn't have to just be typical RGB imagery. It can simulate thermal imagery, it can simulate LiDAR, it can simulate multispectral imagery, and it's all based on measured profiles of different plant materials and the sensors and the spectral, the light source itself. Yeah. You can use that, so why do I care about it as a grower? You can use that to potentially change, to go into a new crop, say you've never measured something in potato. And you want to go in and you want to have a model for detecting some, let's say there's a disease, well, let's just say you want to detect weeds versus non-weeds in potato, and you know generally what those look like. If you can build a model in Helios, you could simulate millions of images to train your model on if you wanted to, and speed up the process of building those models. Probably running out of time. Yeah, thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, all right, so I will turn it on to you, Hovannes. Yeah, just press play, yeah. So stick around for 10 more minutes, and then we will really... Less than that, okay, all right.
So I'd like to introduce to you our SARDOG, which is a smart agricultural robot built by Fresno State team. These are my students. We worked on this, and we've been working on farm robotics platform, the Farm NG platform, and we participated in the Farm Robotics Challenge. So as we know, I'm not going to state the problems of the farming, so we tried to solve several problems of farming. So the solution that we provided was autonomous robot that does SLAM navigation using LiDAR, the precision agriculture, weed detection and elimination, smart harvester, as well as crop-tailored care. We have an actuator goes in the soil, and can provide details about the soil, the nutrients, and also autonomous data acquisition and energy harvester. So this is some of the components that I just discussed. And the robot that we built is on this slide and some of the pictures. So I probably would go and showcase the demo itself. This is the robotic arm detecting an orange and picking the orange. And this is the data acquisition. So it goes in the soil and collects data like nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. It can also smartly detect the health of the plants. And we also build an energy harvester. As the robot goes in the field, it can self-charge itself in 2.5 hours. So here's the demo. Let me see if it will play. Oops. Is there a way you can play in the back? Can you click on play? Is the video. So that's the most important demo part I just wanted to show you. Anyone can play? Oh, okay. But it's not. Maybe you have to go to the YouTube link, or does it not play directly? There we go. I was told that it should play, so let me see. Oh, there we go. Can you start from the beginning, please? Yeah.
Valentine LiDAR. It has 16 lasers inside, video capture of the LiDAR. We're going to be using this point cloud for navigation. Running the joystick app. Perfect. Bring it back. Nice.
So we did a lot of app development.
Our system is going to be detecting weed. As you can see, the sprayer starts to activate.
It can do autonomous navigation and spraying if needed.
The robotic arms camera is detecting the orange based on its color and shape. And as it moves from right to left in the frame, it tracks it accordingly. Closes it.
The actuator is going to go into the soil and measure different parameters of the soil. Test the Ruco marker. As Luna approaches to the camera, it's going to detect what Ruco marker it is, and it's going to start the sprayer. So if it needs some pesticides to be sprayed, not just it sprays, but it also gives to the farmer some information about the crimson seeds, what type of yield, how much water to, and so forth.
People detection. If you approach to the robots within a certain distance, the screen will display a collision warning signal, and as you move far away from the robots will keep following you, and if you change your direction to the left, the robot will towards you by changing its angular rates. Once you get close it again, it will stop.
As the robot is moving, as I approach to it, I get closer it can automatically stop as you come close to it. From it.
It will continue to go. The solar panel, we're getting 44 volt beautifully.
But this was our demo, so yeah, thank you very much.